The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of Building 147 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as Major Lisa Phoenix Chen pulled into the parking lot in her modest Honda Civic. She wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans, a navy pullover, and comfortable walking shoes, having driven straight from the airport after her red-eye flight from Seattle. At 34, her petite frame and youthful appearance often led people to mistake her for someone much younger and far less experienced than she actually was. Lisa grabbed her single carry-on bag from the back seat and hurried through the rain toward the entrance of the Special Warfare Training Center. After 3 years of medical leave and rehabilitation, she was finally returning to active duty, though in a very different capacity than her previous assignments. Instead of leading operations in the field, she would be serving as a senior instructor and evaluator for the Army's most elite training programs. The assignment was supposed to be a gentle transition back to military life, a chance to use her extensive combat experience to train the next generation of special operations soldiers without the physical demands of frontline service. What her new commanding officer didn't know was the full extent of what had brought her to this point, or why someone with her qualifications was accepting what many would consider a step down from operational assignments. The lobby of Building 147 was busy with military personnel moving between classrooms and administrative offices. Lisa approached the reception desk, where a young specialist was typing at his computer while fielding phone calls. "Excuse me," she said when he finished his call. "I'm looking for Colonel Martinez's office. I'm Major Chen, reporting for duty." The specialist looked up at her with obvious confusion. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right building? This is the Special Warfare Training Center. We don't usually have civilian visitors without escorts." "I'm not a visitor," Lisa replied patiently. "I'm Army, reporting for my new assignment." The soldier studied her civilian clothes and youthful appearance with obvious skepticism. "Ma'am, do you have any identification? I don't see any military personnel in civilian clothes on today's visitor list." Lisa handed over her military ID card, watching as the specialist's eyes widened when he read her rank and credentials. He looked from the ID to her face several times, clearly struggling to reconcile what he was seeing. "This says you're a major, ma'am, but you look—" He trailed off, apparently unsure how to finish the sentence diplomatically. "Young," Lisa offered with a slight smile. She'd had variations of this conversation countless times throughout her career. "Well, yes, ma'am, and I thought Major Chen was supposed to be." He consulted his computer screen. "I don't know what I thought, actually. Colonel Martinez just said to expect a new instructor who would be working with our advanced programs." Lisa could see the confusion in his expression. Someone with her rank and assignment would normally arrive in uniform, probably with an aide or driver, certainly not looking like a college student in civilian clothes driving her own car. "Could you direct me to Colonel Martinez's office, specialist?" "Yes, ma'am, 3rd floor, room 314. But ma'am, I should probably call ahead and let them know you're here. They weren't expecting. I mean, they'll want to be prepared for." "For what specialist?" The young soldier's face reddened. "I'm sorry, ma'am, it's just that most of our senior instructors are. Well, they're different than what I expected." Lisa understood what he was trying not to say. The Special Warfare Training Center was dominated by hard-edged male veterans with decades of special operations experience. A young-looking woman in civilian clothes didn't fit the typical profile, regardless of what her ID card said. As she made her way to the elevator, Lisa reflected on the familiar pattern of doubt and skepticism that seemed to follow her everywhere. Early in her career, she'd fought against these assumptions with anger and defiance. Now, after years of proving herself in the most demanding environments the Army could offer, she'd learned that competence spoke louder than arguments. The 3rd floor hallway was lined with photographs of special operations units in action, Rangers conducting airborne operations, Green Berets training foreign forces, Delta Force operators in combat gear. Lisa paused at one photograph showing a helicopter insertion in Afghanistan, remembering similar missions she'd participated in from the other side of the camera. She found room 314 and knocked on the door frame. A stern-looking sergeant major looked up from his desk, his expression immediately shifting to one of polite confusion. "Can I help you, miss?" "I'm Major Chen, reporting to Colonel Martinez." The sergeant major's expression became even more puzzled. "Major Chen, Are you sure you have the right office? We were expecting a senior instructor, but— I am the senior instructor, Lisa replied calmly. Is Colonel Martinez available? He's in a meeting right now, but— The sergeant major consulted his appointment book. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. We have strict security protocols here, and I don't have any record of a civilian appointment today. Lisa handed over her ID again, watching as another military professional struggled to reconcile her appearance with her credentials. The sergeant major examined the card carefully, then looked at her with obvious bewilderment. Ma'am, this says you're Major Lisa Chen, but our new instructor is supposed to be a combat veteran with extensive special operations experience. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Sergeant Major. I am Major Lisa Chen, and I do have extensive special operations experience. The sergeant major's expression suggested he remained unconvinced. Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't look like any special operations officer I've ever met. How old are you? Old enough to have earned my rank and position, Sergeant Major. Before the conversation could continue, a deep voice called out from the inner office. Sergeant Major Williams, is that our new instructor? Sir, there seems to be some confusion. There's a young lady here claiming to be Major Chen, but— Send her in. Lisa walked past the still skeptical Sergeant Major into an office dominated by military memorabilia, unit photographs, and the inevitable collection of plaques and awards that senior officers accumulated over their careers. Behind the desk sat a weathered-looking colonel in his 50s, his uniform bearing the tabs and badges of an officer who'd spent his career in special operations units. Colonel Martinez looked up as she entered, his expression immediately showing the same confusion she'd encountered downstairs. You're Major Chen. Yes, sir. I was expecting. He gestured vaguely, apparently unsure how to express what he'd been expecting. Someone different. What were you expecting, Colonel? Martinez studied her for a moment before answering. Frankly, Major, I was expecting someone who looked more like a special operations veteran. Your file indicates extensive combat experience, multiple deployments, and qualifications that are frankly impressive for someone your age. My age being a problem, sir? Not a problem exactly, but unusual. Most officers with your supposed background are older, more obviously experienced. You look like you could be fresh out of college. Lisa had learned that direct confrontation rarely solved these situations. Better to let her performance speak for itself over time. I understand your concern, sir. Perhaps we could discuss my qualifications and how I can contribute to your training programs. Martinez gestured to a chair across from his desk. Please, sit down. I have to admit, your file raises some questions for me. It indicates that you've served with multiple special operations units, have extensive combat experience, and hold qualifications that are quite rare. But it's also somewhat vague about specific details. What kind of details are you looking for, Colonel? Well, for instance, it lists you as having joint special operations experience, but doesn't specify which units or what type of operations. It mentions specialized training, but doesn't elaborate on the nature of that training. And your medical leave is listed simply as combat-related injuries with no specifics. Lisa had expected these questions. Her file had been deliberately scrubbed of certain details for security reasons, leaving gaps that would naturally raise questions from curious commanders. Some of my assignments involved classified operations, sir. The details can't be included in standard personnel files. I understand that, Major, but I'm responsible for ensuring that our instructors are qualified for their positions. Our students are some of the Army's most elite soldiers, and they deserve instructors who truly understand special operations at the highest level. Lisa nodded, appreciating his concern for his students even while feeling frustrated by his obvious doubt about her qualifications. What would you like to know about my background, Colonel? Let's start with basics. What units have you served with? Lisa hesitated. Much of her service record was classified, but she could provide general information. I've served with the 75th Ranger Regiment, Joint Special Operations Command, and various task forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. In what capacity? Operations planning, mission leadership, specialized reconnaissance. Martinez frowned. Major, those are typically positions held by officers with much more experience than you appear to have. No offense, but you look like you could be my daughter. It's hard to believe you've had time to accumulate that kind of background. I started young and served multiple deployments, sir. How young? I was commissioned at 22 and deployed for the first time 6 months later. And now you're what, 27, 28? 34, sir. Martinez's eyebrows rose. 34, you've been in the Army for 12 years. Yes, sir. And in that time, you've served with Rangers, JSOC, and led special operations missions. Among other things, yes, sir. The colonel leaned back in his chair, studying her with obvious skepticism. Major, I've been in special operations for over 20 years. I know what officers with that kind of background look like, and frankly, you don't fit the profile. Lisa felt her patience beginning to wear thin, but she maintained her professional composure. What profile is that, sir? Older, more obviously experienced, usually male. Special operations is a demanding field that tends to leave marks on people. You look like you've never seen combat, let alone led operations in hostile territory. The comment stung because it dismissed everything she'd sacrificed and accomplished over the past 12 years. But Lisa had learned that arguing about her qualifications was less effective than demonstrating them. Colonel, I understand your skepticism. Would it be helpful if we reviewed my actual file rather than the sanitized version? What do you mean? I mean my complete service record, including the classified portions. It might answer some of your questions about my background. Martinez looked intrigued but cautious. You're saying there's more to your file than what I've been shown. Significantly more, sir. How would we access that information? Lisa pulled out her cell phone. With your permission, I can make a call that will have my complete file delivered here within the hour. Martinez studied her carefully, apparently trying to decide whether she was bluffing or if there really was more to her story than met the eye. Make the call, Major. I'd like to see what we're really dealing with here. As Lisa dialed the number for her former commander at Joint Special Operations Command, she reflected on the familiar pattern of doubt and eventual revelation that had characterized much of her career. In an hour, Colonel Martinez would understand exactly who he was dealing with. The question was whether he was prepared for what her real file would reveal. Colonel Martinez watched with growing curiosity as Lisa made her phone call. She spoke in the calm, professional tone of someone accustomed to dealing with high-level military personnel, but her conversation was brief and to the point. This is Major Chen. I need my complete service file delivered to Building 147, Fort Bragg, within the hour. Yes, the classified portions. Room 314. Thank you. She hung up and looked at Martinez. Your answers are on the way, sir. Major, in my experience, junior officers don't have the authority to simply order classified files delivered wherever they want them. Who did you just call? Someone who can authorize the release of my complete record for official purposes. Martinez's expression suggested he was becoming more intrigued rather than less skeptical. That's a pretty impressive contact list for a major who supposedly spent the last 3 years on medical leave. Some connections remain useful even when you're not actively serving, sir. Before Martinez could respond, Sergeant Major Williams knocked on the door frame. Sir, there's a Captain Reynolds here from the 82nd Airborne. Says he knows Major Chen and would like to speak with her. Lisa turned in her chair as a tall captain in dress uniform entered the office. She recognized him immediately. David Reynolds had been a lieutenant in her Ranger battalion years earlier, before she'd moved on to more specialized assignments. Phoenix, Reynolds said with obvious surprise. I heard someone named Major Chen was here, but I never imagined it was you. What are you doing at Bragg? Lisa smiled, genuinely pleased to see a familiar face. Hello, Dave. I'm starting a new assignment here as an instructor. An instructor, but you're... Reynolds caught himself glancing at Colonel Martinez. Sorry, sir, I didn't mean to interrupt. Not at all, Captain, Martinez replied. You know Major Chen. Yes, sir, we served together in Afghanistan. She was something of a legend in our battalion. Martinez looked between Reynolds and Lisa with obvious interest. A legend? In what way? Reynolds hesitated, clearly uncertain how much he should say. Sir, with respect, that might be better coming from Major Chen herself. Captain Reynolds, Lisa interjected. Colonel Martinez has some questions about my background. You're welcome to share your recollections of our service together. Reynolds looked relieved to have permission to speak freely. Sir, Major Chen, was the most impressive officer I've ever served with. She led more successful missions than anyone in our battalion, and she had this reputation for bringing everyone home alive, no matter how bad the situation got. What kind of missions? Martinez asked. Direct action raids, special reconnaissance, high-value target capture. She volunteered for the most dangerous assignments and somehow always made them work. Martinez turned to Lisa. Phoenix, is that a call sign? It was, sir. How does someone earn a call sign like Phoenix? Lisa felt uncomfortable discussing her combat record, but she could see that Martinez needed more information to understand her qualifications. It came from a mission where our extraction helicopter was shot down. I reorganized the survivors, established a defensive perimeter, and coordinated our rescue while wounded. Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. She was hit by shrapnel but kept fighting for 6 hours until another helicopter could reach us. The pilot said she literally rose from the ashes of that situation, hence Phoenix. You were wounded? Martinez asked Lisa directly. Not seriously that time, just some cuts and bruises. That time, Martinez caught the implication immediately. You were wounded on other occasions. Before Lisa could answer, Reynolds spoke up again. Sir, Phoenix was wounded multiple times during our deployment, but she always came back. She had this way of making impossible missions work through pure determination and tactical brilliance. Martinez was studying Lisa with a new expression. Less skepticism, more curiosity about what he might have missed in his initial assessment. Captain Reynolds, how many missions did you serve with Major Chen? Over 40, sir. She led or participated in more combat operations than anyone else in our unit. By the end of the deployment, every soldier in the battalion wanted to serve under her command because they knew she'd get them home safely. And this was how long ago? About 8 years, sir. Phoenix was a first lieutenant then, but she was already being selected for advanced assignments with specialized units. Martinez turned back to Lisa. Specialized units like what? I'd prefer to wait for my file to arrive before discussing specific assignments, Colonel. But you can confirm that your service record goes beyond what I've been shown. Significantly beyond, sir. Reynolds glanced at his watch. Sir, I hate to interrupt, but I need to get back to my unit. Phoenix, it's great to see you again. The whole battalion was worried when we heard about your injuries. We're glad you're back to full duty. After Reynolds left, Martinez sat quietly for several minutes, apparently processing what he'd learned. Major, I'm beginning to think I may have misjudged your situation. How so, sir? Captain Reynolds is a solid officer with an excellent reputation. If he describes you as a legend in your battalion, that carries significant weight. But I'm still having trouble reconciling that description with your appearance. Lisa had encountered this reaction countless times. People who couldn't believe that someone who looked so young and unassuming could have accomplished what her record indicated. Colonel, what does a special operations veteran look like to you? Older, harder, more obviously seasoned by combat experience. With respect, sir, that's based on assumptions about how combat affects different people. Not everyone wears their experiences on their face. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair point. But Major, you have to understand my position. This facility trains some of the Army's most elite soldiers. My instructors need credibility with students who have often seen extensive combat themselves. If those students don't believe their instructor has the background to teach them effectively, the whole program suffers. I understand your concern, sir. That's why I've arranged for my complete file to be delivered. Once you see the full scope of my experience, I think your concerns will be addressed. How extensive is this experience we're talking about? Lisa considered how much she could reveal without getting into classified details. 5 combat deployments, multiple special operations units, leadership positions in some of the Army's most demanding environments. And the medical leave that brought you here. Combat injuries that required extensive rehabilitation. What kind of injuries? The kind that end operational careers, but don't necessarily disqualify someone from training others. Martinez was quiet for a moment, clearly trying to piece together the puzzle of her background. Major, If your record is as extensive as you're suggesting, why are you accepting an instructor position? Most officers with significant special operations experience prefer to stay in operational roles. The question touched on the most difficult part of Lisa's transition back to active duty. Sometimes circumstances force career changes, sir. The important thing is finding ways to continue serving effectively. Are you saying you can't serve in operational roles anymore? I'm saying that this assignment allows me to use my experience to benefit the next generation of special operations soldiers. That's a mission I consider worthwhile. Before Martinez could respond, there was another knock on the door. Sergeant Major Williams entered with a thick manila envelope bearing multiple security classification stamps. Sir, this just arrived by special courier for Major Chen. The courier said it requires your personal signature to receive. Martinez signed for the envelope and handed it to Lisa. Major, I believe these are your answers. Lisa broke the security seal and removed a thick file folder. The cover page was stamped with classifications she hadn't seen since leaving her operational assignment. Inside were photographs, mission reports, and documentation that told the complete story of her 12-year military career. Colonel, she said, handing the folder across the desk, this should answer your questions about my background. Martinez opened the file and immediately paused, his expression shifting from curiosity to astonishment as he read the first page. Jesus Christ, Major, this is. He continued reading, his eyes widening with each page he turned. Lisa watched as his understanding of her qualifications underwent a complete transformation. According to this, you've served with Delta Force, SEAL teams, and intelligence units I've only heard rumors about. Among others, yes, sir. These mission reports, Major, some of these operations are legendary within the special operations community. They don't list the participants by name, but they list call signs and unit designations, Lisa finished. Phoenix appears in quite a few of those reports. Martinez looked up at her with a completely different expression than he'd worn an hour earlier. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something approaching awe. Major Chen, I owe you a significant apology. Colonel Martinez continued reading through Lisa's file, his expression growing more serious with each page. Lisa watched as he absorbed the scope of her actual service record, operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and several countries that remained classified. The sanitized version he'd seen earlier had barely scratched the surface of her real background. Major, he said without looking up from the file, this mission report from Syria. It describes a hostage rescue operation where a single American operator coordinated with multiple international units to extract 12 civilians from a terrorist stronghold. That's correct, sir. The call sign listed is Phoenix, and the operation is described as a textbook example of special operations leadership under impossible circumstances. He looked up at her. That was you. Yes, sir. Martinez returned to the file, reading aloud from another report. Afghanistan, 2019. Joint operation with British SAS resulted in the capture of a high-value target and the destruction of a major weapons cache. Mission success attributed to innovative planning and flawless execution by team leader Phoenix. He paused. Again, you. I had excellent teammates on that mission, sir. According to this, you've been awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and a Bronze Star with V-Device for Valor. That's more combat decorations than most special operations officers accumulate in entire careers. Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She'd never been comfortable discussing her decorations, preferring to focus on mission accomplishment rather than individual recognition. I was fortunate to serve with exceptional units during active periods of conflict. Fortunate? Martinez's voice carried a note of disbelief. Major, this file describes someone who sought out the most dangerous assignments available and consistently performed beyond expectations. That's not luck, that's exceptional competence and courage. He turned to a section near the end of the file, his expression becoming more somber. This describes your final mission. A helicopter insertion gone wrong, multiple casualties, enemy forces closing from all sides. It says you maintained command and coordinated extraction for surviving team members despite being wounded yourself. The mission didn't go as planned, sir. According to this report, Your actions during that mission saved the lives of 4 other operators and prevented the capture of sensitive intelligence. But you sustained injuries that ended your operational career. Lisa felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she thought about that final mission. Some missions come with a higher price than others, sir. Martinez closed the file and looked at her with a completely different expression than he'd worn at the beginning of their meeting. Major Chen, I need to apologize. When you walked into my office, I saw a young woman in civilian clothes and made assumptions based entirely on appearance. I was completely wrong. I understand your initial reaction, sir. It's not uncommon. It may not be uncommon, but it was unprofessional. You've earned the right to be judged on your record, not your appearance. Thank you, sir. Martinez stood and walked to his window, looking out at the training facilities where the Army's most elite soldiers learned their craft. Major, I have to ask, with your background, why are you accepting an instructor position? You could probably write your own ticket to any assignment in the Army. The question forced Lisa to confront the reality she'd been avoiding since her medical retirement from operational units. Colonel, my injuries weren't just physical. After 12 years of constant deployments and high-stress operations, I was dealing with some psychological challenges that made operational assignments inadvisable. PTSD. Among other things, the helicopter crash was the final incident, but I'd been dealing with cumulative stress for years. The Army gave me all the time I needed to recover, but my doctors recommended against returning to operational roles. Martinez turned back to face her. And you're comfortable with a training assignment? I need to contribute somehow, sir. If I can't lead operations anymore, at least I can help prepare the next generation of operators. My experience might help them avoid some of the mistakes I made. What mistakes? Lisa considered how much she should reveal about her personal struggles. I pushed too hard for too long without taking care of my own mental health. I thought I was invincible, that the stress and trauma wouldn't affect me the way they affected other people. I was wrong. But you're ready to work with students now. I believe so, sir. The training environment is different from operational deployments. Less stress, more control over situations, time to process and decompress between activities. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Major, I want you to know that your background changes everything about how I view this assignment. Instead of wondering if you're qualified to teach here, I'm wondering if we're worthy of having you on our staff. Sir, every assignment has value. I'm here to serve wherever the Army needs me. What I'm struggling with is the fact that you're taking a position that's significantly below your qualifications. You could probably be commanding special operations units instead of teaching basic skills to students. Colonel, most of these students will go on to serve in roles similar to what I did. If my experience can help them be more effective and more survivable in those roles, then this assignment serves a greater purpose than any position I could hold for myself. Martinez sat back down, his respect for her clearly growing with each answer. Major, I have one more question about your background. This file mentions that you served with multiple international special operations units. That's extremely unusual for American officers. I was selected for several joint exchange programs because of language skills and cultural familiarity. It provided opportunities to learn different tactics and procedures. How many languages do you speak? Fluently 4, conversationally another 3. And you learned these where? I have a gift for languages, and combat deployments provide intensive immersion opportunities. Martinez shook his head in amazement. Major, in 20 years of special operations service, I've never met anyone with a background comparable to yours. You're overqualified for this position by several orders of magnitude. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I'd prefer to focus on how I can contribute to your training programs rather than my past accomplishments. Of course, but I think we need to discuss adjusting your assignment to better utilize your capabilities. Instead of basic instruction, I'm thinking about having you develop advanced programs for our most experienced students. What kind of programs? Leadership under extreme stress, joint operations planning, cultural considerations in special operations environments. Areas where your unique experience would be invaluable. Lisa felt a spark of interest. Those topics would allow her to share the most valuable lessons from her operational experience while staying within her current capabilities. That sounds like a worthwhile mission, sir. Good, I'll have my staff begin developing curriculum proposals for your review. Martinez paused, studying her again. Major, can I ask about your medical status? Are there any limitations I should be aware of for duty planning purposes? I'm cleared for full duty, sir. No physical limitations. I do work with a counselor to manage stress-related issues, but that doesn't interfere with my professional responsibilities. I'm glad to hear you're taking care of yourself. Too many of our people try to tough it out without getting the help they need. I learned that lesson the hard way, sir. Martinez stood and extended his hand. Major Chen, welcome to the Special Warfare Training Center. I think you're going to make a significant impact here. As Lisa shook his hand, she felt a sense of relief and purpose that had been missing since her medical retirement from operational assignments. This might not be the career path she'd originally planned, but it offered opportunities to serve and contribute that aligned with her current capabilities and circumstances. Thank you, sir. I look forward to getting started. Sergeant Major Williams will help you get settled and introduce you to our staff. I suspect you'll find that your reputation has preceded you. Several of our instructors have heard stories about Phoenix over the years. As Lisa left Colonel Martinez's office, she reflected on the familiar pattern of initial skepticism followed by recognition of her actual qualifications. But for the first time in years, she felt optimistic about her future in the Army. This assignment might finally provide the balance between service and personal well-being that had been missing from her operational career. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the Special Warfare Training Center in proper Army combat uniforms for the first time since reporting for duty. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her insignia precisely positioned, and her boots gleamed with the kind of shine that came from years of military discipline. But more importantly, she wore the confidence that came from having her qualifications finally recognized and respected. Colonel Martinez had arranged for her to meet with the other senior instructors during their weekly staff meeting. As Lisa entered the conference room, she could see the curiosity in their faces. Word of her extensive special operations background had spread quickly through the tight-knit community of training staff. "Gentlemen," Martinez announced as the room quieted, "I'd like you to meet Major Lisa Chen, our new senior instructor. As you may have heard, Major Chen brings some unique qualifications to our team." The men around the table, all seasoned special operations veterans themselves, studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Lisa understood their reaction. Even with Martinez's introduction, her appearance didn't match their expectations of someone with extensive combat experience. "Major Chen," Martinez continued, "why don't you give us a brief overview of your background?" Lisa stood, feeling the weight of multiple evaluating stares. "I've served 12 years in special operations, including 5 combat deployments with various units. My most recent assignment was with Joint Special Operations Command, where I led direct action and special reconnaissance missions in multiple theaters." Master Sergeant Thompson, a grizzled Green Beret instructor with obvious decades of experience, raised his hand. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but you look awfully young to have that kind of background. How old were you when you started doing special operations?" "I was commissioned as a second lieutenant at 22 and selected for Ranger School immediately. After completing that and my initial assignment, I was recruited for more specialized units." "Rangers," Thompson's expression showed increased interest. "What class were you?" "Class 1208. "I was an instructor there around that time," said another voice from across the table. Sergeant First Class Williams, a Ranger instructor, was studying her more carefully. "I remember a female officer in that class who set records for several events, real small but tough as nails." "That was probably me," Lisa acknowledged. Williams leaned forward, his expression becoming more animated. "I remember you now. You were the one who carried a wounded classmate for 3 miles during the final exercise. We called you Phoenix because you just wouldn't quit, no matter what we threw at you." The room's atmosphere shifted perceptibly as Williams' recognition provided credibility that her own words couldn't establish. Lisa could see the other instructors beginning to view her differently. "Phoenix," repeated Master Sergeant Davis, another Special Operations veteran. "I've heard that call sign before. Afghanistan, right?" "Among other places." "Wait a minute," Davis continued, his eyes widening. "You're the Phoenix who led that hostage rescue in Syria, the one where you coordinated with multiple international units. That was a team effort, Lisa replied, uncomfortable with the individual focus. Holy shit, whispered someone from the back of the room, followed immediately by an embarrassed, sorry, ma'am. Martinez stepped in before the questioning could continue. As you can see, Major Chen brings considerable experience to our team. I'm assigning her to develop advanced curriculum for our most experienced students. Chief Warrant Officer Johnson, the senior intelligence instructor, raised his hand. Ma'am, what kind of advanced training are you thinking about? Our students are already pretty experienced by the time they get here. I'm considering programs on leadership under extreme stress, joint international operations, and cultural considerations in special environments, Lisa replied. Based on my experience, these are areas where even experienced operators can benefit from additional training. Have you worked with international units extensively? Johnson asked. I've served exchange assignments with British SAS, German KSK, and several other Allied Special Operations units. It provided opportunities to learn different perspectives on similar problems. Master Sergeant Thompson was studying her with obvious respect now. Ma'am, how many combat operations have you participated in? Lisa hesitated, knowing that the actual number would sound almost unbelievable. Over the course of 5 deployments, probably close to 200 missions. The room fell silent. Even for special operations veterans, that number represented an extraordinary level of operational experience. 200, Davis repeated. That's more than most operators see in their entire careers. I was fortunate to serve during active periods and with units that maintained high operational tempos, Lisa explained. Williams shook his head in amazement. Ma'am, I take back any doubts I had about your qualifications. That kind of experience is exactly what our students need to learn from. Thank you, Sergeant Williams. Martinez addressed the group. I want everyone to understand that Major Chen is here because she chose to be here, not because she was forced into a training assignment. She's volunteering to share her expertise with our students instead of continuing in operational roles. Why did you choose training over operations, ma'am? Asked Sergeant First Class Murphy, a SEAL instructor. The question touched on the most difficult aspect of her transition. Sometimes circumstances change, and you need to find new ways to serve. I believe my experience can be valuable to students who are preparing for the kinds of missions I've completed. Were you injured? Murphy pressed gently. I sustained injuries that made operational assignments inadvisable, Lisa answered honestly. But those same experiences give me perspectives that might help students avoid similar situations. Chief Johnson nodded thoughtfully. Ma'am, that kind of hard-won wisdom is exactly what our advanced students need. They're all confident and skilled, but many of them haven't learned about managing long-term stress and avoiding burnout. That's exactly what I hope to address, Lisa replied. Special operations requires more than just tactical skills. It requires understanding how to maintain effectiveness over extended periods without destroying yourself in the process. Master Sergeant Thompson spoke up again. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what made you realize you needed to step back from operations? Lisa considered how much to share with this group of experienced professionals who would understand her struggles better than most. I spent 12 years believing I was invincible, that stress and trauma wouldn't affect me the way they affected other people. I was wrong. The helicopter crash that ended my operational career was just the final incident in a pattern of ignoring my own psychological needs. How are you doing now? Williams asked with genuine concern. Much better. I work with counselors. I've learned to recognize my limitations, and I've found purposes beyond individual operations. Teaching others allows me to contribute without the psychological demands of constant operational stress. Davis nodded approvingly. Ma'am, that's exactly the kind of lesson our students need to learn. Too many of them think they're invincible until something breaks them. My goal is to help them understand that taking care of themselves isn't weakness. It's essential for long-term effectiveness. Martinez stood to conclude the meeting. I think you can all see why I'm excited about having Major Chen on our team. Her combination of operational experience and personal insight will be invaluable for our advanced programs. As the meeting broke up, several instructors approached Lisa individually to welcome her and offer assistance with developing her curriculum. The transformation from skepticism to respect had been complete, but more importantly, she could see genuine enthusiasm for the contributions she could make. Master Sergeant Thompson was the last to approach. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for my initial reaction. In this business, we sometimes forget that heroes come in all shapes and sizes." "No apology necessary, Sergeant. I understand the reaction." "One more thing, ma'am. I've been in special operations for 22 years, and I've never met anyone with a background like yours. The students are lucky to have you." As Lisa left the conference room, she felt a sense of belonging that had been missing since her medical retirement from operations. These instructors understood the challenges she'd faced and the value of her experience. More importantly, they respected her choice to transition from operations to teaching rather than viewing it as a step down. For the first time since her injuries, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. 3 months after her arrival at the Special Warfare Training Center, Lisa had established herself as one of the most respected and effective instructors on the staff. Her advanced leadership course had become so popular that there was a waiting list of students wanting to participate, and her reputation had spread throughout the special operations community. On this particular morning, Lisa was preparing for a special presentation to a group of visiting senior officers who were evaluating the training center's programs. Among the visitors was General Patricia Hayes, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, who would be observing Lisa's leadership seminar and reviewing her curriculum innovations. Lisa arrived early to set up her classroom, arranging materials and reviewing her lesson plan one final time. Today's topic was leadership under extreme stress, drawing on real-world examples from her own operational experience to illustrate principles that couldn't be learned from textbooks. As students began arriving, Lisa noticed that this group was particularly experienced. Senior NCOs and mid-grade officers with extensive combat backgrounds of their own. Teaching students like these required credibility that could only come from genuine experience, but it also provided opportunities for rich discussions about leadership challenges. "Good morning," Lisa began as the class settled in. "Today we're going to discuss leadership in crisis situations, specifically how to maintain unit effectiveness when everything is going wrong simultaneously." She clicked to her first slide, which showed a tactical map of a hostile territory. How many of you have been in situations where your original plan became completely irrelevant within the first 5 minutes of execution? Every hand in the room went up, followed by knowing laughter. Good, then you understand that real leadership isn't about following a predetermined plan. It's about adapting to chaos while keeping your team focused on the mission. Master Sergeant Rodriguez raised his hand. "Ma'am, how do you maintain command presence when your own stress levels are through the roof?" It was exactly the kind of question Lisa hoped for, one that required her to share hard-won wisdom rather than theoretical knowledge. "Sergeant, let me tell you about a mission in Syria where everything that could go wrong did go wrong." For the next hour, Lisa guided the class through a detailed case study based on her actual experience leading a hostage rescue operation. She described how equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and enemy contact had forced constant adaptation while maintaining team cohesion and mission focus. "The key insight," she explained, "is that your team will mirror your emotional state. If you panic, they'll panic. If you remain calm and focused, they'll follow your lead even when the situation appears hopeless." Captain Williams, a Green Beret officer, raised his hand. "Ma'am, how do you develop that kind of emotional control under pressure? Is it something you're born with or something you can learn?" "Definitely something you can learn, Captain, but it requires honest self-assessment and deliberate practice. I spent years thinking I was naturally good at handling stress, but I was actually just suppressing my reactions. That works for a while, but eventually it catches up with you." "What do you mean, ma'am?" Lisa paused, considering how much personal detail to share with this group. "I mean that I spent 12 years believing I was immune to stress and trauma. I kept pushing harder and taking more dangerous assignments because I thought I was invincible. It took a serious injury and months of counseling to realize that I'd been slowly destroying myself psychologically." The room fell silent as students absorbed this admission. In special operations culture, acknowledging psychological struggles was often seen as weakness, but Lisa's obvious competence and extensive background gave her words unusual credibility. "Ma'am," said Sergeant First Class Jackson, "how do you recognize when you're reaching that breaking point? Most of us are pretty good at convincing ourselves we're fine when we're really not." Outstanding question, Sergeant. The warning signs are usually subtle at first. Increased irritability, trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating, loss of enjoyment in activities you used to love. The problem is that those symptoms are easy to explain away as normal stress or temporary fatigue. She clicked to a new slide showing stress management strategies. The real key is having people in your life who know you well enough to notice changes and who have permission to call you on them. That might be family members, close friends, or military counselors, but you need someone who can provide objective feedback about your mental state. Captain Martinez raised her hand. "Ma'am, what advice would you give to female operators dealing with the additional stress of proving themselves in a male-dominated field?" Lisa smiled, appreciating the question from one of the few female students in the class. "Captain, that's something I dealt with throughout my career. The temptation is to work twice as hard and take twice the risks to prove that you belong. That's a dangerous trap because it accelerates the stress accumulation I was talking about." "How do you avoid that trap?" "By understanding that you've already proven yourself by being here. You've met the same standards as everyone else, and you've earned the right to be treated as an equal. You don't need to be better than everyone else, you just need to be competent and reliable." "But what about when people question your qualifications based on appearance or gender?" Lisa thought about her own arrival at the training center just 3 months earlier, when Colonel Martinez had questioned her background based on her youthful appearance. "Captain, people will always make assumptions based on limited information. Your job is to let your performance speak for itself rather than arguing about perceptions." The discussion continued for another 30 minutes, with students sharing their own experiences and challenges, while Lisa provided perspective based on her extensive operational background. As the class concluded, she felt the satisfaction that came from knowing she'd provided valuable insights that could help these operators avoid some of the mistakes she'd made. As students filed out, Lisa noticed a woman in General's insignia entering the classroom. General Hayes approached with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command at the highest levels. "Major Chen, I'm General Hayes. I've been observing your class from the back." Lisa came to attention. "Good morning, General." "At ease, Major. I wanted to tell you that was one of the most impressive leadership seminars I've ever observed. Your combination of operational experience and personal insight is exactly what our senior operators need to hear." "Thank you, General. I've been reviewing your file and your curriculum innovations here. Colonel Martinez speaks very highly of your contributions to the training program." "I'm glad to be contributing, ma'am." General Hayes studied her carefully. "Major, I have to ask, are you satisfied with this assignment? With your background, you could probably have any position you wanted in special operations." Lisa had been asked similar questions many times since arriving at the training center, but coming from a general officer, it carried more weight. "General, this assignment allows me to serve in a way that's sustainable for me personally while contributing to the effectiveness of future operators. I find that deeply satisfying." "But don't you miss operational assignments?" "Sometimes, ma'am. But I've learned that there are many ways to serve, and this one allows me to help others avoid some of the challenges I faced during my operational career." General Hayes nodded approvingly. "Major, that kind of wisdom is rare in our community. Too many of our best people burn out because they don't know when to transition to different roles. I was fortunate to have good medical care and counseling that helped me understand my options. And now you're paying that forward by sharing your experience with others. I think that's commendable." "Thank you, General." "One more thing, Major. I'm always looking for officers with your combination of operational experience and teaching ability. If you're ever interested in expanding your role, perhaps developing training programs for other installations, I hope you'll let me know." "I appreciate that, General." As General Hayes left the classroom, Lisa reflected on how much her life had changed since that difficult final mission 18 months earlier. The helicopter crash that had ended her operational career had seemed like a devastating setback at the time, but it had ultimately led her to a new form of service that was personally sustainable and professionally rewarding. Her phone buzzed with a text message from one of her former students who was now deployed overseas. Major Chen used your stress management techniques during a difficult mission last week. They worked perfectly. Thank you for everything you taught us. Lisa smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what success looked like in her current role, not individual achievements on dangerous missions, but helping other operators become more effective and more resilient in their own careers. As she packed up her classroom materials, Lisa thought about the young woman she'd been 12 years earlier, confident, fearless, absolutely certain that she was invincible. That person had accomplished extraordinary things, but she'd also paid a price that had nearly destroyed her. The person she was now, older, wiser, marked by experience but not broken by it, might not be able to lead operational missions anymore, but she could do something equally valuable. She could help the next generation of special operators understand that taking care of themselves wasn't weakness, that asking for help was strength, and that true leadership meant knowing when to adapt and transition rather than simply enduring until you broke. Phoenix had risen from the ashes of her operational career to find a new mission that was just as important as any she'd completed in hostile territory. And for the first time in years, Major Lisa, Phoenix, Chen was exactly where she belonged.